Hi everyone, Hungry Reader here. And if you're like me, you've heard it 1,000 times as you were growing up. They said it in movies, they said it on TV, they said it in comics and magazines, and, maybe they even said it in books sometimes. Kids rule, teachers drool.
Your principal can smile.
Media and merchandising empires were built on this simple concept that kids know best and adults know zilch.
So our gym teacher, Mr. Bonazzo, thinks we eat Kellogg's Frosted Mini Wheats because it's
Very nutritious, and they know I
don't have a clue.
Now, I don't stand before you to contest this assertion. Oh, no. I think it is important and vital that we listen to kids a lot more than we do. My problem is that these movies and cartoons are so preoccupied with making jokes about Brussels sprouts and dumping slime on people and burping and whatnot that they never really get around to telling the kids why it is that the adults not only do not rule, but actually proceed to drool. It's the simplest answer in the world. It's because when these grown-ups were kids, they had all that zilch pounded into their heads by the adults that they knew. But so few children's media will actually come out and say this. I've got a book that's all about it. It is called The War Between the Pitiful Teachers and the Splendid Kids. The War Between the Pitiful Teachers and the Splendid Kids by Stanley Kiesel. Read and illustrated by The Hungry Reader. It was after school, and the janitor expected to find this last classroom empty. She found a small, red-haired boy at the blackboard, pocketing a piece of chalk. "This your room?" "Yes." "That your chalk?" "No." "Give it them. Let's skedaddle." "I want it." "How come you're so needful of chalk? What's your name?" "Skinny. My name's Timmy, but everyone calls me Skinny." Well, names don't lie. This is our hero, but rather by going by Timmy Smith, or Timmy Roddy, or Timmy Atkins, he prefers the name Skinny Malinky. Skinny is a ward of the state who's been passed from foster home to foster home. The first paragraph of this story is the moment when he meets his real mother figure, Ida. Ida comes to love this little kid who hangs around with her all the time, but the more she reads that the teachers have written, the more she realizes they're terrified of him. The children described in the pages she read did not at all resemble the kids she met and joked with in halls and in the yard, especially Skinny. Ida came to respect the power of words, for language in the hands of teachers could transform an ordinary kid into a disturbed element. Ida had never been a reader, but now she gobbled up anecdotal records the way some people devour soap operas. Finally, the day comes when Skinny is to be transferred to Scratchland, the school for hopeless kids. You might think Scratchland would be trouble for Skinny, but no, Skinny is trouble for Scratchland. Skinny holds no truck with the institutional way things are run at this school, and with the help of his new friends Curly and Fritzy, the first shots are fired. First, they sabotage the flags that the teachers rely on for school scheduling. Green flag for a sunny day, blue flag for special school board schedule. So what do you do when they put out the turquoise flag? One class took a field trip just to be on the safe side. By now, the teachers are holding their own palavers and powwows because they know something's up. Let's meet some of the teachers, the pitiful teachers, as it were. There's Skinny's own teacher, Mrs. Jerome, whose mouth is on permanent autopilot. There's Mr. Skurnot, the civics teacher, a former farmer. Mr. Bulletad, the gym teacher, a champion athlete gone to pot. Mr. Snokadaka, the English teacher who diagrams every sentence he hears. And Mrs. Solemnside, who is Mrs. Jerome's aunt, and not a teacher, but a great fan of discipline. But just like in your school, even in this motley crew is a saving grace. It's the Dumpy sisters, Jenny Dunphy and Bambi Dunphy, also known as Bumpy Dumpy. The administration is not fans of theirs, but they came all the same. Wars are almost always started by the silliest, teeniest things, and this one is no exception. The war between the pitiful teachers and the splendid kids officially begins when Mr. Snokadaka criticizes Skinny's free verse poems. Not only are these contributions sadly lacking in meter and rhyme, but they are distinguished by a lamentable lack of correct spelling, punctuation, and syntax. I believe, Mr. Malinky, you have written a little masterpiece of error. This here's an oration of war. Skinny, Curly, and Fritzy are the generals in this war, but there's one more they need. The warrior chief of the whole school. Big Alice. Big Alice is a literal feral child who was actually raised by hyenas. I adore the hair on the back of your neck, Big Alice. May I touch it? Sure. Big Alice is such a badass that she actually keeps a pet shark, which becomes the first salvo against the teachers when they put shark into the rice pudding. It doesn't go over so well. Sassy shark! Undaunted, Alice corners Mr. Bullethead in the men's room, Nachinsky! Nachinsky! And forces him to ballet dance. But Mrs. Jerome is absolutely convinced that she can turn Big Alice around and into a good citizen. Big Alice eats her. Perhaps you've been wondering who the villain of our story is. It could be none other than Mr. Foreclosure. Mr. Foreclosure, the villain whose name inspires fear, is an ant.
I am well aware of the nature of this problem. What is most alarming is that the kids are organizing. Like Scratchel and Skinny Malinky and his cronies, kids everywhere are preparing themselves for what looks like a major war. Sterling, tell our friends our plans.
Project Metamorphosis. It's our code name for the status quo solidifier. How do you fight a war against kids? Mr. Foreclosure has a solution, and it's the worst thing you can think of. The status quo solidifier is a machine that turns kids into young people. By now I'm sure a lot of you are wondering the same thing. Where are the parents in all this? Good question. They can't be deported as aliens, and they're too young to be shot into space. I wonder if we ought to contact the parents. Parents? It'll be a waste of time. You'll never pry them loose from their TV screens. It wasn't until I read that sentence that I realized what a terrible dystopia this world already was. Since kids in this world are basically unsupervised except by teachers, kids are streaming in from all over the state to join Skinny Malinky's war. The teachers have the ultimate weapon, but the kids have the advantage of numbers. How do they solve this with the least bloodshed? Surprisingly, it's Big Alice who has the idea. What's she saying?
Arthur! King Arthur!
An Arthurian tournament! Big Alice is chosen as the champion of the kids, and the teachers and the kids all have a jousting match to determine who walks away and who gets solidified. It all comes down to Big Alice versus the Rococo Knight. And no one stands a chance against Alice! Or do they? Almost as quickly as it had begun, the war between the pitiful teachers and the splendid kids is over. And the kids have lost. Skinny can hardly live with himself. This was his war, and he failed the kids. At least that's what he's telling himself, until a familiar face gives him a much-needed visit. Listen, Skinny, don't you punish yourself. You got friends you don't even know, you hear me? And Ida tells him what the Dumpy sisters told her. The reason Alice lost the fight is because there were two teachers on the field, and one of them was an ant. Mr. Foreclosure was there. He bit Big Alice and paralyzed her. Skinny had no choice. If he was fed into the status quo solidifier, the war would be over. He had to run. All the remaining kids have been transformed into young people, except for Alice, still paralyzed. But the Dumpy sisters not only rescue her, but revive her with some very strong tea. Alice takes off for the nature preserve where she grew up, where Skinny is on the run from bounty hunting teachers. But like Ida said, he has friends he doesn't even know, including a great horned owl. Big Alice's best friends, the great horned owl and the hyena she calls her brother, lead Skinny to the last safe place to be a kid, the sewers. Now you might ask, why are the sewers such a great place to be a kid, apart from the whole Ninja Turtles connection? Well, it's because there's a certain word for people who live underground. Worms.
What?
Bookworms. It's like an entire race of kids who live only to read, and they've built themselves a secret society underground. Skinny meets a friendly bookworm named Four Eyes. Four Eyes shares with Skinny all the secrets of the worms, like how they get their food and their books, by using a complex variant of toilet flushing on cafeterias and libraries. The worms have rigged up the sewer pipes so they can pretty much suck up anything they want from any building, like more books, or more furniture, or, as Skinny suggests, teachers? And it just so happens that Skinny's best friend in the world is now working for Mr. Foreclosure. And with Ida's help, Skinny learns something very useful. They're having a teacher convention, and it's located right here in Mr. Foreclosure's house. All the teachers are going to be there. Well, not all the teachers. Even Skinny wants to rescue his friends, the Dumpy Sisters. At the closing of the market at 3 p.m. New York time, sir, Foreclosure Industries International rose to a gross market value of $200 billion. Wonderful, wonderful. And what is your figure for those kids who had accidents with the faulty solidifiers? Only 68 last week. They've all been successfully converted into breakfast cereal. Breakfast cereal? Tricks are for kids, not from kids. Now, Miss Girdlestone, please, what has been the result of your committee's work with the Electric Tables project? Those were the last words spoken at this historic gathering in Mr. Foreclosure's library at Lake Kachuma. Finally, all the worms can come out, including Skinny, and see what has become of the school. And it's a bitter victory. The young persons, what a sorry-looking lot they are. They look like little old men and women. There are no more teachers left, and no more kids. The only place that Skinny has left to go is the wildlife sanctuary, with the hyena, the owl, and Big Alice.
You'll find your own way, you skinny malinky. I know you will.
Now, I don't want to be like those cartoons and movies that I was just railing about, so why don't we talk about it right now? What makes kids splendid and teachers pitiful? Let me tell you a little story. Do you ever play the video game Sonic Colors? It's very well named. It's very colorful. One day I was playing it, and my mom came into the room just as this hyperkinetic opening sequence was playing. She watched for a minute in utter disbelief. And then she turned to me and said, "How are teachers supposed to compete with this?" I've never forgotten just how true that statement was. I never realized before that of all the things that are competing for a kid's attention, like TV and video games and movies and comics and their parents and their pets, teachers have one of the quietest voices. School is more crucial than any of those things because it's where you learn how to think, or at least it should be. But school is built on the idiom of punishment. It looks and feels like a concentration camp. Everything at a school is second and third and fourth hand to accustom you to the idea of being poor. They have one class for kids with special needs. All kids have special needs. Teachers, the single most valuable occupation you could ever take on. Do you think any of them dreamed of being teachers when they were kids? No, this is their punishment for getting a degree in the liberal arts instead of engineering. Just imagine a world where schools could actually compete with video games for your attention. Better yet, what if you didn't have to? What if video games and movies and books were made for schools? And I'm not just talking Word Munchers and Oregon Trail here. If video games can make this fun, then they should be able to make this fun. That's why the teachers are pitiful. Well, maybe that's not the right word. That's why the teachers are to be pitied. Because if you know a teacher who couldn't just name 25 ways off the top of their head to make school better for everyone, students and teachers alike, well, They probably got too much education in school.
If you'd like to read The War Between the Pitiful Teachers and the Splendid Kids, well, good luck. It's out of print and there doesn't seem to be an ebook version. Check Amazon or eBay, or better yet, your local library.